Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Latino Vote Podcast, coming to you live from Washington, D.C. and Congressional Hispanic Caucus Brown Prom Week. Everybody who's ever been around the Latino diaspora in Washington, D.C. knows that there's 1 week a year where everybody flies in from all over the country with your gaudiest outfits, your biggest hairstyles, and for Chuck Rocha, some shade of red in a sports coat. Welcome, Mike Madrid.
Well, greetings from Los Angeles. I'm actually down in Southern California today, the largest Latino county in all of America, the biggest Mexican-American diaspora outside of Mexico City. It's Hispanic Heritage Month. Happy Hispanic Heritage Month, Chuck, to all who celebrate. I know you do. You do like a daily party, I think, through the whole month, don't you?
There's something going on every day. And what makes me most uncomfortable is now that I see that you're in some new location, for all of you who are watching online, is that a cross over your left shoulder? That makes me feel you got crosses and dishes behind you. Have you broke into a church and you're in the commissary?
I'm at my little sister's house today. I had a book signing. For the Latino Century in my hometown of Moore Park, California, the greatest city in America. I had a bunch of my high school friends show up and put their arms around me, show me some support. It was like an old high school reunion. It was the best thing of all time. I'm going to be speaking at UPenn and Georgetown, and spoke at Berkeley and Stanford and UC Irvine and Cal State Fullerton. But my favorite institute of higher education that I was able to go to on this book tour, Moore Park College, graduate class of 1993 and 94. I got an AS and an AA degree. So it's good for me to come back home, and I want to spend some time with my mom and my sister. So here I am.
I got an AA degree back in the 90s, but it was from Alcoholics Anonymous. But we'll talk about that at another time. Let's keep talking about Hispanic Heritage Month, and that has kicked off this week, because later on, after we talk about some things that are going on this week, I want to talk about a deep dive that I've done on some Spanish language spending. But as we get ready to record now on this Wednesday morning from both coasts, evidently, Kamala Harris, the vice president today, will be speaking at the CHCI conference. Now, for all of you who don't know about all of this, there's a gala that happens on Thursday night. That's the Brown Nerd Prom. That's where there are thousands of every Latino operative, lobbyist, everybody's there, all the members of Congress, and the president is speaking there. The president always speaks there. This is my 21st year of going to that. But the conference that leads up to that, Mike, today, the vice president is speaking at the conference. Now, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, again, for all of you scoring at home, is the nonprofit C3 arm. They are nonpartisan. They're governed by a board that I used to be on 15 years ago when I was with the Steelworkers Union. And we raise money from unions and corporations. And the key, and the reason I'm talking about CHCI, is the key to the funding of what they do goes towards paid fellowships on Capitol Hill that give most of the Latinos in this town that have any gray hair on their body at all came through the CHCI structure, because pretty much what it is like a 6 to 8 month paid job search while you're getting paid minimal amount of monies to be a fellow in a Congressional Hispanic Caucus member's office while being provided some minuscule housing. So it's really a big deal, and why I was on the board. And then their conference this week, and then I'll kick it over to you, Mike, is the vice president speaking there today. And what are you looking for? What do you think about the conference? And, jump in here.
Well, let me first, real quick on CHCI, Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. This was the way that we gathered together when there were a few brown faces like yours, Chuck, and running unions and corporations that realized we had to break people from our community into Congress at the staff level, because we didn't have the networks. We didn't have the nepotism. We didn't have the yank to get people in there. So we were actually trying to get people, Latinos, onto the Hill. Because it is not easy to break into. And it's been brilliant. Like you said, now there's older people that have done it, alums from spanning many, many years, many, many decades, has changed the course of the direction of staffers' lives on Capitol Hill. And so thank you, and thank everybody who's done work on it. Look, this is a big moment for Kamala Harris, because This is going to be the first time where the media is going to be talking about the effectiveness or lack thereof of the Latino program that she has been running from her campaign. This is going to be an assessment of whether or not the pivot that she has made has worked. And perhaps most importantly, there's going to be some reaction from members on the Hill to this very, very different approach to Latino voters that she has taken, leading the party in a very different direction. So I think there's going to be a lot of public pronouncements about how great it is and how great she's doing. My sense is there will also be some grinching off the record with people saying, maybe she's gone a little bit too far, too strong, too hard. Or this still does present us with the best opportunity to get the immigration reform stuff done on the back end. I also think she's going to reference that in her speech. This is going to be I think she's going to say, look, this is tough medicine. This is the way this is going to be. I don't think the Democratic Party can ever go back. They are going to have to be a border security party going forward. They've established a border security conference, but she's also going to say that we can do this with compassion and with a heart. And I think she is going to say that we can do it. I think she's going to be very limited in what she says about the immigration reform piece because, I'll be real candid with people. You hear a lot of this from some of the consultants within the campaign who've essentially been marginalized, talking about the need to put together and talk about the immigration reform piece, but no one's talking about it. And the reason is because that's not what's going to get Kamala Harris to winning this thing. She's going to say it to be deft and astute and kind of keep the coalition together and keep some people happy. The truth of the matter is, if and when she's elected, there will be movement on the immigration reform piece. But now is not the time to flex that muscle. Now is the time to fall in line and help her get elected, play the politics smart, keep your mouth shut. I'm going to say it. That's Mike Madrid. That ain't Chuck Rocha. Keep your mouth shut, and that's how you're going to get something done on the Hill. Okay? That's the way this is going to work. That's the way that there's a new sheriff in town, like literally new prosecutor in town, and she's going to do things differently. She's helping the party. She's helping the party get out of the morass. There's your word for the day, Chuck. Out of the morass that she has, that some of these people have gotten the Democratic Party into. She's leading them out. And woe to anybody who's going to try to trip her up and stumble on her way because people have fallen in line. Thank goodness. I'm shocked. I'm surprised. I'm so grateful that enough Democrats are backing Kamala's play here because it's the right direction after being led in the wrong direction for a decade. And I'm glad to see her go into this audience because I think 95% of these folks get it. I think they're going to keep getting it. I think they're going to be helpful, and they're going to realize that this is probably the path and strategy they should have taken 15, 20 years ago if they wanted to get something done on immigration. Chuck, what do you think?
Tonight's about and tomorrow night, both nights are about the activists. There's nobody in this room that's not voting for her. This is for the press. This is for the activists to be ginned up to go back home and to do a couple of things. One would be to get all ramped up to where you would go back home and get people to canvass in the Latino neighborhood where you're from. You'd get people to give another $25 or $30. This is to solidify the base to get them ramped up. Now, keep in mind, I said this to a New York Times reporter this morning, that this group of activists that are in the room, that are literally all of the Latino activists across the country, for the most part, the hierarchy of those institutions, were demoralized 3 months ago. 3 months ago, I had half of that room on suicide watch, worrying about somebody jumping off the top of their apartment building because people were so depressed that they thought Donald Trump was fixing to waltz into the White House because of the underperformance of not only Latino numbers, but the Democratic numbers as a whole. There's been an infusion of energy now.
Joy.
And joy. And, Cory Booker said one time on a panel in the Congress, you can't steal my joy. I tell that to Ebony Payne all the time when some little hater pops their head up about her or me. And I'm like, they don't get to steal our joy, baby. They all wish they had our lives. Screw those people. Anyway, I digress and say that tonight is about joy. And it's about just getting people energized. It's also about her saying that a lot of people talk about what they're going to quote unquote do about Latino representation in the hierarchy of our government, where we've been lacking forever, Democrat or Republican. Mike writes about this in his book. I talk about it all the time. Tonight and tomorrow, and we'll get to this in a minute, and tonight at the White House, they will talk about how, look at what we're doing, not what we're saying. Julie Chavez Rodriguez was given the title of campaign manager, and they could have given that to anybody. We've brought on 4 new senior advisors that are Latino that were all mainly working at the convention and other places this week who are now on board. We have been spending way more money, and we'll get to this later, than others have been to communicate. We are showing you what we are going to do after we're elected, before we're elected, which is all the Latinos have ever asked for. And I think if I was writing her speech tonight, it would be, look at what I'm doing, because it's backing up what I'm saying. Because too often, and Mike and me talk about this, folks show up in the last few months and are like, we're here now. We're going to help you. We're going to save you. Now we need to get all of you to get in line and vote, even though you haven't seen us. You haven't hired us, and you really haven't acted like you give a shit about us. Kamala Harris' campaign has been doing that, and they've been putting a lot of folks in positions of power. And then, Mike, this leads into the second part. You got Kamala Harris speaking today at the conference, and then tonight at the White House, there's a gathering to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month on the back lawn of the White House, and I'm going to get to go. And Mike, I don't know if you were invited or not, but everybody who's anybody's going to be at the White House tonight.
I was invited. It's the first time.
Whoa. I was joking.
No. I was invited.
We have hit rock bottom at the White House, and Chuck Rocha and Mike Madrid were invited to come.
Hide the silverware. Hide the silverware at the White House.
No doubt. It's like that. You seen that meme with Denzel Washington, where he's like, I'm leaving here with something. I'm leaving here with something. I'm going to have all kinds of White House paraphernalia with me tonight. I'm telling the Secret Service right now, you better strip search me, because I'm bringing some souvenirs home to mama.
And with the two of us, I think it would get really sophisticated on the strategy of getting some stuff out of there. I'd be walking out with Lincoln stuff. That's what I'm telling you right now. Whatever he touched from you, I'd go big.
That's right.
Look, and kudos to them, and I want to thank them. I have been a pain in the ass to the Biden and Harris folks, but it's done out of love. It's like a little bit of tough love. Like when an older sibling has to be like, look, get your shit together. This is what you all need to do. And if I need to be the bad guy to give you cover to move over in this direction, I'll be willing to do it. But they know that I'm cheering for them. They know that I'm rooting for them. They know that I'm backing them. And they were kind enough to give me an invitation. And I'm deeply, deeply honored and touched by that. There's some really great people who I think we'll both acknowledge after the race, not going to bring it up now, but who've just been a really professional staff who've just been really, really good at this. And I want to thank them. I won't be there. I'm on the book tour. But I do want to get a live, we got to put a GoPro on your head is what we need to do. We need to have Chuck Rocha walking around with his cowboy hat and a GoPro stuck on it, getting some live feed from the back lawn of the White House.
Especially Ebony Payne. Nobody wants that. She says too much stupid shit comes out of your mouth. We do not need this recorded.
Yeah, good. You married up, man. She's so right about so many things. So good for her. Good for you.
When I did my vows, now for those folks, when I did my vows, she had asked me to write some vows. I didn't realize I was supposed to do it at the wedding. So I wrote them an hour before I went to the wedding. And there's pictures of this. Yeah. And I sat down and I wrote down just what was on my mind. And so when Congressman Cardenas he married us, he handed me the microphone and I pulled out my vows. I said, look, in Hawaii, the first thing you'll know is there's this guinea grass that grows on the side of the highways like crazy. It's invasive and it is freaking everywhere because the lawnmowers that mow the grass spread that seeds everywhere and it runs wild. Now, the first thing I'm going to tell all of you who are at this wedding is do not pull over into the guinea grass because there are guardrails there that you can't see because of the guinea grass. I'd like to say that the motto of our wedding today is going to be guardrails in the guinea grass. I'm the guinea grass and she's the guardrails.
How romantic. How romantic.
But so real.
Well, it's accurate. I'm not going to say it ain't accurate. And I'm not going to say you aren't right. Usually are. It's just when you're looking for romance, Chuck Rocha, come to Mike Madrid for the romance.
Please. He's an artist. He's a poet. I am hammer and nails. That's what I do. I see a nail, I grab a hammer. Hence why you do not want to put a GoPro on me tonight, but there'll be a lot of our guests there tonight, a lot of folks who listen to our podcast, a lot of people who like what we've been putting out. And tonight is a night to celebrate. And we're going to get together. We're going to talk about these closing 45 days. It's right here now. Things are getting close. The president's coming tomorrow night to the Brown Prom. That's going to be off as this episode will come out afterwards. I might get some voice notes of some folks that I can give to Andreas, who's producing, if I can get anybody to record something nice being said about the podcast and that, because still, everywhere I go, folks are always saying how much they enjoy, listening to us, and it's CHCI week. So there's something every night. And it reminds me, Mike, and I'll kick it back to you, is last night I helped host a fundraiser. And you should know this for all of our Latino listeners. I hosted a fundraiser for a Latina state senator who's been in the state House and the state Senate in New Jersey for over 20 years.
Wow.
Puerto Rican. Her name is Nellie Poe, State Senator Nellie Poe. She has now been placed on the ballot, on the congressional ballot in New Jersey, to take the place of long-term Democratic Congressman Bill Pascrell. Bill Pascrell passed away. He was older. He passed away a few weeks ago. God rest him. Great guy, really great guy from Paterson, New Jersey. And the 3 local Democratic county chairs might get to appoint who takes his place on the ballot, because ballots were getting ready to go out. And so the party came together. The Latino population in Paterson in that district is about 40% of the district. And for the first time in the history of New Jersey, I think for the first time, we're going to have a Latina congresswoman, Puerto Rican, from the great state of New Jersey.
Wow. That, New Jersey, we got to do something on New Jersey too. I mean, I know it's not a competitive swing state, but there's a lot of Latinas elected in New Jersey. There's a lot more women elected than Hispanic men. And we should probably, maybe it's even after the election, because so many other states are coming up, and every state is getting interesting, Chuck. So we'll look at all of them. But let me dial it back to the event tonight. I just want you to report back on what the vibe is, what the sense of the community is, what leaders are feeling like. I mean, I know they're excited, but I want to know about the vote in particular. So we're going to have you come back to us with some good feedback. If you get some live audio, great. If you can sneak in the GoPro, then that's great too. But if you can't, just give us a little bit of that old school kind of this was your sense of the way things are going on the ground and how people are feeling, because my sense is it's going to be a heck of a lot better than anything that you went to and attended in D.C. In the past couple of years.
Yep. And today I'm going to a fundraiser at noon because, again, everybody's in town for a Latina that who is Luz Rivas, who's going to take Tony Carter's place up in the San Fernando Valley. Did I get that right?
San Fernando Valley. That's right. Yep.
So she's going to fundraiser today. I'm going to go see her. Again, this new leadership. Again, Mike talks about these Latinas that are getting elected everywhere. There's going to be another Latina in Congress, which is great, taking the place of Tony Cardenas. Safe Democratic seat. She'll be there for a long time. She's a badass. I got to hang out with her. But that leads into my next topic, which I want to talk about and get Mike's feedback on. And I really wanted to do a deep dive for this episode because I did this thing yesterday where I talked about advertising in English and Spanish with Univision and some other partners. And I went back and looked at all the Spanish language spending that's happened to date, combining that with all of the reservations from now till November. Now, for all of you at home, calm down. Not everybody has reserved. Most people who have any kind of a brain have already reserved, because if you listen to Mike Madrid in our last episode, he would have told you that if you don't reserve this stuff, it's all sold out. So you have to reserve it if you want to advertise in the last 3 weeks well in advance, girls and boys. And the bottom line is I looked at Spanish because I can't go into a computer system and differentiate a white ad that's targeted to Black people, Latinos, or white people. So I use the Spanish language as an unscientific, improper term of measurement, because it gives me some idea. It gives me an idea, because if you're not spending in Spanish, and you can make the argument, and I would agree or disagree, then how well are you going to be doing that in English? If you're a Democrat, Republican, it's different. But this big Mike Madrid windup is to say that today, rounding these numbers, $19 million have been spent by Democrats and $1 million have been spent by Republicans in Spanish language presidential TV advertising, which encompasses the campaigns, the super PACs, and any C4 that are doing partisan advertising. So it's all coupled together. Now that seems like, yay, Team Democrats, and you're whooping that ass. Well, we're spending more money, but there's a couple things I want you to keep in mind, and then I'm going to kick it to Mike. One is Joe Biden is some of this advertising. And when Joe Biden was doing this advertising, you didn't see the numbers moving. You're seeing the numbers moving now for Kamala Harris. Will they continue to move? We can have that argument. I think that they will. You can say that Republicans are talking to Latinos more in English because at least 70% of our people are consuming in English. In other areas, it could be as high as 80 or as low as 60, like in the Central Valley. So that's fair too. But the thing that I want to say is that in most places, in battleground states, Latinos will make up at least 20% of the electorate, maybe 25 or 30 in some places. And let's just do some Chuck Rocha elementary math and say that half of them consume their news in Spanish, a quarter of them do. If you look at every dollar, and I'll stop here, Mike. If you look at every dollar that's spent in the presidential election, there's going to be almost $2 billion. And if you're only spending 20 million combined by both parties in Spanish, that means that 1% of all of the spending is going to Spanish, when at least 12 to 15% of these folks probably are consuming. So I just lay that out there when we talk about us not getting all the information and where we are today with the money. Mike, how does all of that land with you?
I mean, I think that's a really great analysis. It's a really good overview. Really good. Let me and especially with the perspective of that 19-20 million, sounds like a lot, but it's less than a drop in the bucket. It's probably more than we've seen in the past, but like I said, it's going to go up every year. I want to add maybe a little bit of context, even more context and texture to all of this, because what I will say is, you all know that I have been a critic of overspending on Spanish language TV. I've never said don't do it, but I'm saying keep it in perspective. I'm one of those believers. We've had very credible guests on this show, pollsters saying it's about 17% of our audience is where that number should be, that Spanish language communications and spend. That's what a credible poll is nationally. There are certain areas where it does justify a higher spend. And one of those areas is in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, if you're looking at some of these numbers where there are Latino subsets of these polls coming out, Kamala Harris is winning 75% of the vote in a lot of these Puerto Rican communities. That's where you want to spend more on Spanish radio for get out the vote purposes. And by the way, the last 5-6 weeks of a campaign where we're close to getting to is where you want to dump a ton on Spanish radio and Spanish TV, Spanish online, because you're moving from this persuasion to getting out the vote. So why now and why on that medium? Well, folks, the answer is because the Spanish-speaking audience is a 70% plus Democratic base voter anyway. The people who should be spending on Spanish early are the Republicans, not the Democrats. The Democrats should be spending earlier targeting Latinos on English where they're losing voters. But now it's too late. Republicans missed that window. They missed that opportunity. And the Democrats really need to double, triple, quadruple down with core base vote and getting out the vote, raising awareness, letting our community, which, as we all know, tends to unfortunately be more of a lower propensity voter than any other voter group. Now is the time to throw the kitchen sink at this, drop as much as you can on Spanish radio, get those turnout numbers high. Reminder again, for those of you that may have been sleeping during Chuck's part of the podcast, because I know you weren't sleeping during mine.
Stop it.
Latinos will be larger in terms of the raw vote in every single one of the swing states than the margin of victory. This is a first time in history. This is the first time in history that I'm telling reporters, yeah, the Latino vote's going to decide this thing because of that dynamic, because of that factor. You want to talk about Wisconsin? You want to talk about North Carolina? We all know Arizona and Georgia. or Arizona and Nevada. Set those aside. Those are just a given. I'm saying look at the Latino vote in North Carolina, look at the Latino vote in Pennsylvania, look at the Latino vote in Wisconsin, Georgia. That's where the margin is going to be made up in those 4 states. And so Spanish language radio and TV and Spanish language online is where you're going to make up your margin if you're the Democrats. You got to get that turnout of that Spanish speaking first gen recently naturalized immigrant voter. That's where they're living. That's where they're communicating. That's a 70% plus base vote. You could also argue if you're going to go in and try to, peel off some of that Cuban, Venezuelan diaspora in Florida. I don't think they should, but if they were, that's where you're going to go get it too in Florida. Outside of that, it doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense, but the spend should be a factor of 4 or 5x from what it is, even heading into this stretch. It's good to see that the Harris campaign is spending a hell of a lot more than the Trump folks, because that tells you how much the Trump folks actually, as much as it sounds like they're doing the right thing, that they're really the beneficiaries of these changes that are happening. All of these Latinos are moving. I would again argue, I argue in my book, is happening despite themselves, not because of themselves. These are not some evil geniuses out there. They're getting this stuff by, falling into the water because they tripped and fell off the boat, not because they dove in. So thanks for bringing the numbers, Chuck. I think you're exactly right. I think your overview was perfect.
2 things here, and then I'll go to the Senate, is while you were talking, I looked back down at my notes and found 2 things that I meant to tell you. One is, if you took all the general market spend, that's English for all of you at home, and all the general spend reservation, we're at 20 million with Spanish, but that would represent 0.06 of all the money being spent right now. Yeah. Less than 1%. So just leave that there. The second part is, this week, Daisy, my business partner, had asked me about looking for some numbers because for a client, for a proposal we were putting together, and we went back and it just stuck in my head, and I wanted to make sure I brought it up on the podcast. We pulled the number of Latinos that voted in Pennsylvania in 2020, Democrat, Republican, Independent, but just those that are showed as Latino on the voter file, which means that it's probably about 80% right. 90% right. There's probably a 10% where somebody named Melissa Anderson was Melissa Morales, but she married an old white boy named Anderson and took his name, right? So that's what I'm saying. But just that number is 260,000, right? 260,000 people, Latinos in Pennsylvania, to your point, in 2020 in the general election.
Yeah. And what's Pennsylvania going to be decided by?
Shit. What do you think? 30, 40,000 people?
Yeah, probably. Maybe 50 at the most.
Yeah, agreed.
So there you go. That's what I'm saying. And like you said, Kamala Harris should get a bigger Latino break in Pennsylvania than anywhere else. And most of the polling that I've seen is showing that. And the reason is because the Puerto Rican vote in the Northeast has historically broken 70% plus for the Democrat. Okay, it's not like the Puerto Ricans in the corridor down in Florida, by the way, that are almost breaking 50-50, or at least did the last 2 election cycles. So maybe it's cold weather that makes you more of a Democrat. I don't know. But what I will say is this. If you take those 260,000 votes that Chuck is talking about, they are more of a Spanish speaker than the average Latino.
They definitely speak it faster. I'm sorry.
And they speak it a lot faster. They speak it with their hands, too. Their hands make a big part of it, those gestures. And you get a 70-30 split. Let's say 70-30 of that 260. That puts Pennsylvania in the win column for Kamala Harris. That's right. That's smart. That's why they're there. That's why they're spending. That's why they're using the tactics that they're using. That's what we're trying to bring out right here. Is this is smart strategically, it's smart tactically, and they're engaging the GOTV effort in Pennsylvania exactly the way that they should be.
Let's turn now to the Senate, where there's lots of big states with lots of Latinos in it as well. Pennsylvania, again, one of those, Bob Casey running. Arizona, our boy Rubin running. Nevada, we always talk. So there's 3 just big states with Senate races. And the spend so far is the Democrats have spent about $11.5 million and reserved $11.5 million to the Republicans, $4 million. And this is almost exactly in line to what they spend, Mike, 2 years ago in 2022, when it was the difference of the Republicans spent $4 million last time, exactly the same. And the Democrats spent a little bit more to date because they were so worried about Kelly and so worried about in an off-year election. Me and Mike talked about this in the last podcast. He's shaking his head now because he knows what I'm going to say. It's harder to get Latinos out in an off year, so they were spending more money in Spanish. A 4 million more so far.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's the right tactic. That race is going to be interesting because this is Mike Madrid saying this. Is not Chuck Rocha. I think Ruben's going to win. I think he's going to win going away, which is awesome because I think he's a transformational candidate on the national scene. By the way, we'll talk about this more later. And I know people don't want to jinx it, but I think Ruben's going to win, and I think he's going to win with a significant increase with a lot of demographics, which is in some ways it's great because you want the win, but for nerds like me, it's like I want a clean look at what this would look like under normal circumstances. I think he's going to get a lot of Republican crossover votes, and I believe that there is. I believe that there's even a Trump Gallego voter. I believe that.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, people are saying that ain't the case, and that's not going to happen because people don't ticket split to that size. But I'm calling bullshit. There are. You can have a lot of Trump voters that are going to vote for Ruben Gallego. He's running a very smart campaign. Those Arizonans know what they're doing. Ruben is a prototype for the future of the working class of the Democratic Party. I know, and look, I get some pushback on this all the time. The folks in DC believe that the future of the Democratic Party is, all due respect, Tim Walz, Amy Klobuchar, Tim Ryan, Gretchen Whitmer, the Rust Belt, white collar, blue collar working class. It ain't. The future is Ruben Gallego, Cortez Masto, Alex Padilla. It's where working class Latinos are at. And like I said, that pivot will be made after this election cycle. I'm not saying Tim Walz was a bad choice. I think it was a great choice for the race this cycle. But you want to start putting Texas in play. You want North Carolina in play. You want Arizona locked down. You want Nevada to be in a more competitive position than it's moving in the past 3 election cycles, because Nevada is that one state that has been moving more red. It's the one swing state that's getting more Republican, not less. That's the Latino working class. Those aren't white working class Rust Belt workers, folks. That's the change. That's the big pivot the Democratic Party is going to have to make going forward. I'm sure Chuck and I will be talking a lot about that because the Rust Belt is going to be changed to the Sun Belt for the Democratic Party's base of support. You don't do that in diners in Ohio and West Virginia and Kentucky. You do it in taquerias in Phoenix and Austin and Las Vegas. That's where it's going to happen.
That's true. And then to wrap up the spending here on the stuff in the House, you should know that. And I'm telling you this to tell you 2 things. One is I think the presidential campaign is underfunded on their advertising. Folks asked me this morning, what could she be doing differently? I think she's doing everything right. It just all needs to be doubled now. The House and the Senate, y'all, we talked about this a year ago, but it's literally going to come down to the Latino vote. Mike Madrid loves to talk about a few Latino votes in North Carolina and Pennsylvania making the difference in the presidential. And he's right. But in the House races, man, it's even more minuscule on the amount of Latinos that are going to make the difference in a handful of races that are literally going to determine. And let me say it one more time to be more dramatic. The Latino voter are going to determine without a shadow of a doubt who controls the U.S. House of Representatives and makes Mr. Jeffries the speaker. And I'm going to tick through some races right now where there's Spanish language advertising, where there is a marginal seat with less than 1% separating the Democrat and Republican margins. And it starts where Mike Madrid loves to talk about, and I'm not even going to let him talk about it today, which is California 13 in Duarte. It's California 22 in the Central Valley right next door with Valadeo. It's Mike Madrid's old home district down in California 27, where him and his parents moved out to the suburbs. That's Mike Garcia, Republican.
I'm in that district right now.
Okay, there you go. Right there in California 27, where the Democrats have probably nominated the whitest white guy whose literally his name is Whiteside. So there you go, Democrats. Again, but it's still a toss-up race. Big Latino. That's the 3 big races in California, not to mention having to keep California 40, looking at doing California 47, and then switching to New York City and New York State, where there's Spanish advertising going on in New York 18, Spanish language advertising going on in Pennsylvania 4. There's New York 19 and 22 and 23, all having smaller to larger Latino populations. And that's just girls and boys, New York and California, where there's already Spanish language and Latino operations that's been going on for months on both sides of the aisle. Both parties know that they have to deliver this Latino vote. I don't go into great detail here because I'm working in many of these races, but I'm here to tell you it's much different than what you've seen in cycles past with the amount of money and intentionality around these races in New York and California. And just for shits and giggles, we would talk about Arizona 1, Arizona 6, Colorado 8, New Mexico 2, Texas 15, Florida 13. And I could go on. Pennsylvania 10. That is Allentown and Bethlehem, Mike, where there's more Latinos in Allentown now. That used to be a town of steelworkers 20 years ago. That's the determining force for Susan Wild, who's the Democratic congresswoman there, who only won by 51% last time. The races that I just blabbered off are over 12 deep, and we only need, what, Mike, 4 seats to win back a majority?
Right. Yeah.
So that's the argument here. Sure, the presidential gets all of this information, and that's cool. But these lower house races where there's been more Spanish and English focused Latino outreach than I have ever seen, because guess what? The campaigns may miss it, but I'll promise you who has picked this up. Senate Majority PAC, House Majority PAC, the DCCC, and then the Republicans on the other side understand this. And they are fighting it out at the committee level and the House PAC level to make sure that they're trying to talk to Latinos. Mike?
Look, you guys are getting some really, really good wisdom here. Better listen to Chuck. And what I would strongly recommend is rewind that little diatribe. There's another word for you, Chuck. Diatribe that he just.
I don't know that tribe.
Rewind that a couple more times and listen intently. Send it to your friends at the D-Trip because I want to really underscore the importance of what he just said. And I want listeners out there, and Chuck, you can fact check me on this too. Of all of those districts he just rattled off, and every swing competitive district in the House, I have yet to find a single Republican holding a seat that did not overperform Donald Trump with Latino voters. Let me say that again. The Republicans in those districts have performed better than Trump with Latino voters. And let me throw a little bit more data at you. Ron DeSantis dramatically overperformed Trump with voters in the state of Florida. Greg Abbott has met or exceeded Donald Trump's floor of support with Latino voters. Doug Ducey, the Republican governor of Arizona before Hobbs, met or exceeded Donald Trump with voters in Arizona. Even Brian Dawley, the sacrificial lamb that ran against Gavin Newsom in California, overperformed Trump with Latino voters. So all these governors of all these big Latino states, Republican governors and or candidates, and all of the House Republicans that are sitting in these swing seats all have something in common. They're all overperforming the 8-point rightward shift that went to Trump. Now, I make this case in my book, gave out this information free. White House is listening. Hope the Senate committees and the House committees are listening too. That tells us pretty strongly that Donald Trump is not creating the rightward shift. He's limiting what would be a bigger rightward shift for Republicans. So if the Democrats aren't spending offensively and defensively in these districts, you are out of your mind. And the race that I keep bringing to show this most illustratively, there's a third word for you, Chuck.
Illustratively. That's not a word.
The Duarte seat in California, where the Republican in a Central Valley suburban seat was getting 50% of the Latino vote. Mike Garcia in suburban North Los Angeles County, the seat that I'm in right now, was winning the Latino vote. It was a Republican. So the old conceptions of how Democrats need to play in these seats is wrong. They need to overspend what the national campaign is doing. They need to be investing bigger, better, stronger, starting with Spanish, but dramatically changing up their appeal, their issues matrix, their approach, their cultural competency, All of it. And I'm talking about the Democrats, let alone the Republicans, because once the Republicans figure it out, and they have not yet, folks, they have not, I assure you. I know these people. I've seen these people. I've worked with these people for 3 decades. They have not figured it out yet. When they do, the battle's really going to engage. And I think what Chuck just pointed out, go through all of those seats. Tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think I am. There's much more happening on the ground with our vote than most people realize. It is far, far, far more competitive down ticket than it is at the top of the ticket. And as I've been pointing out, it's still not great news for Democrats when Donald Trump is averaging 35 to 37% of the vote. Not a good place to be.
One thing I want to make sure that I've mentioned is that I've thrown a lot of cold water on the DCCC and others, but this year, the last couple of cycles, especially this cycle, amazing amount of work being done in that community. They realize, we all realized some cycles ago that there needed to be more work done in this community, especially because of redistricting. And now there's so much spending going on with the D-TRIP and House Majority PAC, and on the Republican side, like there's a lot of spending, but Democrats are outspending Republicans with outreach to Latinos. And you're going to see this. And the second piece of this is, without going into any great detail, is there's been a dramatic change in the Senate races and the House races that we see now that Kamala Harris is at the top of the ticket. So we will see if what Mike Madrid is talking about comes to fruition, my word today, fruition in the end results here, because you see this infuse of energy that's there that wasn't there for Joe Biden in these Latino heavy districts that are really making these things become way more competitive for the Democrats. When 3 months ago, me and Mike off camera, we're like, there's no way we're going to win back California 13. There's no way we're going to beat the incumbents in California 22. But today, things have dramatically changed. And I can't go into any particulars because I work in those races, but say that now it's anybody's jump ball and Democrats have a chance to win because Kamala Harris has motivated a new young group of voters who weren't engaged, who were bored with both of these candidates. To Mike's point, they weren't crazy about Donald Trump, and Duarte did a decent job at talking to him. So he got a lot of that vote. So we will see as we get ready to close things up here. I want to bring up 2 things and let Mike, give me his final thoughts before I close this out. Is coming up on October the 1st in Washington, D.C. at Perry Eso Restaurant. We're now going to have not only a book launch party for Mike and his little book memoir he put together, where he's in the south of France right now, I think, trying to sell it. But he is now trying to do that here in Washington, D.C. We're also going to have a live taping of a podcast. If you want to come, I have an email address for you, which is the last name Saenz, in Spanish, SAENZ. Saenz, Vanessa Saenz, but just use her last name, Saenz at solidaritystrategies.com. We have limited seating. See how we do this? Limited seating, first come, first serve. So make sure you RSVP if you want to come. We're going to be putting things out on the Twitter social media and also putting things out on the Facebook social media. And then also, I would be remiss if I did not shout out my other business partner, Luis Alcarter, who was born and raised in California 22 in Vidalia. Did I say that right? Madrid? Visalia. He was raised in Visalia. He came to this country at 13, undocumented, with his parents, who moved there. They were in LA for a little bit. And his parents used to drive back and forth from Visalia to LA, which is not close. And they would go to this big flea market there, and they would buy clothes at the flea market. And then this is how entrepreneur Mexican immigrants are. They would drive those clothes back every week back to the Central Valley. They would clean them, press them, and they would sell them to farm workers who were working in Visalia. And that's how him and his family made a living. He would go on to graduate with honors from high school at Visalia High School. He would go on to Fresno State, where he would graduate with a political science degree. He would get an opportunity, Mike Madrid, to be an intern for, guess what? CHCI. He found it online. He applied to be an intern. He got to come to Washington. He did an internship. He went back home and worked for the Mexican consulate, helping people with driver's license and shit around Visalia and Fresno. And then a buddy of his wife went to work for a crazy Mexican in D.C., and he got connected to me, and he was like, I really want to come back to D.C. I'm looking for an internship, anything to get back to Washington, because I think that's where I will. I hired him as an intern 7 years ago, and today he's an equity partner in my firm. But yesterday he was... Excuse me. He was sworn in as a U.S. citizen. And I think that that's beautiful. Very few things get to me because I'm an old hard ass. And but when he got this stuff yesterday, and he got to, be at a courthouse in Washington with all these people, it was really, really beautiful. And I wanted to bring that up to everybody here.
That's well said. Obviously, a beautiful, beautiful story. And Chuck, thanks for sharing that. I never seen you get taken like that before. So, brother, I know it means a lot to you.
Very few things get to me. Very few things.
That was beautiful. Thanks for sharing that with us and the audience. I love you, man. I appreciate your fight. I love what you're doing for people, giving people that opportunity. That's what it's all about. Guys, we would love to have you. You can meet Luis at the event on October the 1st. RSVP early because there's going to be a sizable group, but it's going to be limited too. We got to do a live podcast, so we got to be worried about sound. So we'd love to have as many people there I love this event because, first of all, thank you, brother Chuck, for putting this together for me when I come into DC. But there's going to be a Never Trump group that I've been affiliated with, a bunch of Republicans and a bunch of Latino political types. It's going to be the most eclectic DC event in a long, long time. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm honored to be there, to sign some books, have a good time. Come down, meet Chuck, meet myself, get some books signed. I'm hoping Chuck brings some Theo Bernie books too, so that we've got some stuff to sign.
They're half price. Don't worry, I'm gonna bring them. They're half price now.
Perfect. So we'll make it happen. We'll get it going. And Chuck, why don't you take us out?
And so don't forget, RSVP at signs@solidaritystrategies.com. This is going to be our first run through on the live performance before we start our stadium tour, which I'm sure will come right after the election. Don't forget to like us. Don't forget to give us a review. Don't forget to call your mama if you're lucky enough to have her. And until next week, that's over and out for me and Mike Madrid. Thank you so much.